Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. If you're like me, you're probably not too fond of this oft-mentioned concept in the American news cycle in recent days known as inflation. The expert definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods, and we see inflation as a prime cause for a rise in costs of goods and services. But where did inflation come from? How did we get to the point where we are today, where prices seem to rise almost willy-nilly? And for that matter, did other cultures in other time periods also experience inflation, or is it merely an American phenomenon? Let's make some sense of these questions now by exploring the history of inflation. Now, money in itself is an arbitrary concept, but in the sovereign hand of God, money is universally accepted in civilized societies as the very thing that people use for trade, for goods and services, and for income. When money is appropriately weighed in terms of value, this usually makes for an economically healthy society. When this does not happen, societies can be very harmed financially, and this is where inflation can really run wild. Now, the threat of inflation is as old as mankind itself, but one of the most important early examples of it comes during the Roman Empire. Now, at various times, inflation would rear its ugly head, but this happened especially so during the crisis of the 3rd century AD, a time of decline in Roman civilization after the high watermark of the 2nd century and before the fall of the empire with the rise of Christendom in the 4th and 5th centuries. So during this time, political leaders demanded that mint workers would melt coins with a mix of cheaper metals than the usual silver and gold that was used for coins in order to be able to print more or to print at the same level when gold or silver was scarce. Now, this weakened the monetary value, and over time it would find its way to businesses and personal accounts, and it would drive the prices of goods up while also driving down the value of the Roman coin. Inflation is not limited to the West, of course, as ancient China and the medieval Arab world also experienced similar inflationary periods in their history. Now, a similar standard existed for the United States as did for ancient Rome, not necessarily with gold coins, but rather with paper dollars that were the equivalent of a certain amount of gold. This, by the way, was known as the gold standard. That's another story for another time. I say this not to support or condemn the gold standard, which was abandoned by the nation in the 20th century, but simply to tell you that a similar phenomenon happened in the United States throughout the 20th and into the 21st century. Here's how it worked. Money started getting created under orders from the ruling government at an astronomical rate, therefore devaluing it. So we have inflation, too much money chasing too few goods, which then drives the prices of goods up while simultaneously bringing down the value of the money. Now, I would submit to you that as long as mankind exists, there will always be the existence of inflation, or at the very least, the threat of it, as we've seen it happen continuously throughout the last century. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.